Chen, and Erica Vaughn is on the committee but not able to be present today. Please note that it's being recorded for those of you who'd like to recommend it to others to watch. We're grateful as well for Provost Coltrane, his presence here today, for the organization of this work. Now, while not official members of the committee, Kathy Gordon and Terry Pasco, as well as Debbie Neal and Samantha Zysad, also provide support for this committee. In terms of the review process, here are some things to keep in mind. The Provost's official website lists the committee and will include a survey for collecting information about different areas of performance. The Dean's personal statement and CV, if not already available, will be available on the law school server for those who are members of the law school community. This committee is a fact-finding committee, and as chair, my goal is to ensure that the process is fair, appropriately transparent, and in keeping with your policies and practices. The committee joins me in this task as well. We wish to facilitate a process that provides the provost and the president with the requisite information so that they can facilitate the best possible future for the law school. Now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Dean Michael Moffit. He will make his presentation, and then he will entertain questions from the audience. Thank you very much, and hope you all do.
Thank you, Yvette. Thank you to the members of the committee, and thank you all of you who chose to be here today. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and be part of this. Oh, I have a presentation that I need to put up. Before I get started, let me also thank the students who are here, and let me say right now, I know you have to leave at 1, so it's okay if you need to scurry off at 1. And I actually know there are a couple of faculty members who need to do that as well, and so we will not make great meaning of you departing at 1, unless you intend for us to make great meaning, in which case you should wave your arms or stomp or something, because otherwise we will assume otherwise. 5 years ago, then President LaRiviere and then Provost Jim Bean offered me the position as dean here at the law school. And at the time I said that it was the greatest professional honor I had ever been given, and now 5 years later I still say the same. This is a presentation in the context of my 5-year review, and so at some level the presentation is about me and about what I've done and about how I've done it, or what I've not done and what I have, or how I have not done it. I acknowledge that, but I think it would be a mistake to take this time and focus entirely on the past or entirely on me, because pretty much everything that has mattered at the law school over the last 5 years has happened because of others, many of whom are in the room right now. And almost everything that's going to happen important for the law school in the coming years will be because of the people in this room, or maybe some of you watching it on video. And so with that understanding, I think it's appropriate that we spend some time talking about what has happened in the last 5 years, but with a particular nod towards what the coming years are going to look like. At some point, someone else is going to be dean of this law school. Whether that's soon or later, there's going to be another dean of this law school, and we need to do all that we can to set it up for success as best as we can. So with that in mind, what I thought I would do with some comments is talk briefly about 7 things. Talk about the context in which the law school has made its decisions over the last 5 years, the strategic responses we collectively have developed and done our best to implement, dive in on 4 specific aspects of that strategy, and for those of you on the faculty, this will all be very familiar: distinction, student success, beyond JDs, and development, and then offer a couple of concluding thoughts. So first, the context. There are a lot of things that have happened in the last 5 years that have set the stage for this being a different period in the life of the law school than many. And frankly, a lot of the things that have happened over the last 5 years have not broken our way. Some of them have been in our control. A lot of them have not been in our control. And I don't offer this because it is either excuse or explanation fully for all that we have done, but to understand the decisions we've made, we have to acknowledge the context in which we've made it. So let me name 3 pieces of that context. First, as you know, applications to law schools nationwide have been cut almost in half in the last 5 years. And our law school has had a very similar experience with its application declines. There are a lot of theories about why that decline has happened. I think probably most of them have some validity. None of them have full explanatory power. But to understand how this law school has chosen to make decisions about its future and to not acknowledge this would miss probably the largest thing that has happened over the last 5 years. The second thing in the context for us is that the job landscape for our students has been really, really hard. This year, it appears to be in the process of turning around, or at least it is the first year we have not seen a decline, but it's the first year we've not seen a decline in many years. And so probably the two are related to each other in some ways, and we could talk more about that if you're interested. The third of the contexts that I think is important for understanding this law school and the decisions that we've made is more local. I'm in my 5th year as dean, and in that 5 years, we collectively have had 5 presidents and 6 provosts. That is no individual person's fault, but it means that the landscape in which the law school has been called upon to make strategic decisions from a university leadership perspective has been a shifting one. Every single person who has occupied the president's office or the provost's office has reaffirmed for me the importance of having a strong law school at the university, but each of them has articulated that importance in different ways. Each of them has developed different internal systems, different budget models, basically the landscape within which we have been operating, even within our own institution, has been one of transition. So this is what we as a community decided represented our best guess at what we ought to do about it. We adopted 3 strategic priorities that have driven most of our energies, most of our dollars. And again, for those on the faculty, this is all very, very well trodden ground. But for those who are not, in our view, there are 3 things that we need to get right. We need to be distinctive. That is, our law school can't look like every other law school. The marketplace is too crowded, and we will not win if a JD or a legal education is treated as a commodity. We have to somehow be different. And in my mind, there are 3 pieces to that being different from the University of Oregon's perspective. Our reputation, what we do, and how students experience it. And I'll say more about each of those here in a minute. The second prong of our strategic priority articulation has to do with our students' success. We simply cannot be the law school we need to be if our students are not successful, and that also has 3 components in my mind. One is they need to be set up for professional success. The second is they need to have manageable debt loads so that they can make responsible professional decisions early in their careers and throughout their careers. And the third is, and I'm not sure pride is the right word, we want students to be glad they came here. We cannot succeed as a school if our students are not glad they came. The third piece of our strategy has to do with diversification beyond the JD. The demand for JDs has been in free fall, almost half of what it was 5 years ago. But I do not believe that that is because there is a decrease in the demand for legal education. The law is increasingly central to virtually every aspect of modern life. People recognize that it is important. People are willing to pay money to learn about the law. They just aren't willing in the same numbers to spend 3 years and $100,000 to get the one product which law schools historically have sold, which is the JD. We are an industry being punished for selling only one product broadly. The law school has recognized that and has sought to diversify those things that we sell, the things that we do, while staying true to what it is that we are. We are not a lot of things. What we are at our core, is good at teaching people about the law and pressing our understanding of the law and its application in the real world. That's what we're good at. And what we're doing is doing that in the context of more than just the JD. The JD will forever be the heart of the school, but we also have 2 master's programs, we have an undergraduate program, and we have other non-degree programs that we are offering, and I'll say more about each of those. That is the broad strategy that our school has been focused on over the last few years, and I think it continues to serve us well. So let me dive in to each of those sub-elements briefly. So the first is distinction, and the first piece of distinction is reputations. Rankings are damnable and important, and damnable, and really damnable. But we ignore them at our peril. And so we can't. We have 3 programs in our school ranked very highly nationally, and looking around the room, there are faculty leaders of each of those programs who can be justifiably proud, and we collectively can be proud that we are a school where that kind of excellence can be generated and sustained. Our school's overall rankings are less impressive than these specialized programs. They are still more impressive than the university as a whole. They are still good, solid rankings. Our reputation among academics and among judges and lawyers are strong. Our overall total ranking is not as strong. A function of the algorithm that is used for determining those overall rankings, which includes some things like our reputation among academics and judges, but also things like our students' employment rate, and things like how much money we spend per student, and the incoming stats of our students. And we can say more about the overall rankings. This is a piece of the puzzle in our strategy, and what we have largely done over the last 5 years is, broadly speaking, stay flat. There are a few of these areas where we are better than we were. There are a few areas where we're not as good as we were. But on balance, what we have not seen is the school make dramatic moves in our overall reputation as a school. And so there are some opportunities there for us. Second piece of distinction is, do we do anything different than everybody else? And so one piece of that distinction is, particularly compared with many of the law schools with whom we compete for students, we do a better job than most at taking advantage of being part of a major interdisciplinary research university. We have lots of faculty who spend a lot of time across Agate Street, and I think to our enormous benefit and to theirs. And, just looking around the room, Nancy does interdisciplinary, Merle does interdisciplinary, Mims does interdisciplinary, Margie, Caroline, Leslie, Adele. I'm at risk now of saying somebody. Michelle, John, Ebe. I'm probably just now horribly insulted somebody who I don't spot. There's a lot of interdisciplinary work going on. Even in this room, and then beyond this room, there are others who are doing interdisciplinary work. I think we've done a better than average job of that when it comes to our faculty and interdisciplinary. I think we have not done as well as we need to when it comes to our students. We continue to tell our students correctly that they need to know more than just laws in order to go out and make the difference that they want to make. And it's not clear to me that we do the job that we need to in helping them to take advantage of the fact that there is this great university across the street. And so I think there's an opportunity there for us to do more. We are different because of the Portland program. And hi, by the way, to the folks on the giant TV. The Portland program is something about which this law school ought to be enormously proud. We have been talking about Portland for at least the 16 years that I have been here, and probably longer than that. And it was over the last 5 years initially because of entirely, let's be plain, entirely because of faculty energy around this, that those conversations pressed forward. Some from people who are in this room. Ofer and Nancy spent a lot of time working on preliminary things, and then Mohsen Manesh grabbed the ball and ran with it. The faculty endorsed it. Mohsen and Carrie are now up there along with Emily, and I'm excited about what Portland will mean for our school. The preliminary feedback that we are getting from students is enormously positive, and I think from a distinction perspective, offering students the chance both to be at a major research university and to be in Portland is something we can uniquely claim, and that is good for us. I say additional programs under the substance because, as many of you have heard me say before, we are not big enough, we are not rich enough to try to be all things to all people, but I am actually convinced that we could be one more thing and be it really well. Good. Well, we could, yay us on one more thing would work. I have suggested that that my instinct is that the place where we would do best to develop one more program of distinction would be something in the business area. Something not that would have us be one more Wall Street law school, because we would not win at that game, but something that would have us be uniquely Oregonian in some way related to the idea of a vibrant, thriving, just economy. As the only public law school in the state, I think we have an important role to play there. But that will be part of the faculty's conversations in the years to come. So that's the substance part of distinction. There's also the experience part. What is it like to be at Oregon as a student? And the feedback there is really good. We get extraordinary feedback from our students about what it is like to be a student here. And I think a lot of the credit for that should go to those in the building who are on the front lines. I think we have an exceptional staff. The people who interact with our students from the very first moment they are thinking about law school all the way through to the time when they are counted as alums, I think do an extraordinary job. I don't think we can take full credit for this. I think that the students themselves perpetuate a culture here that is one in which we can be proud, but for which we cannot take all of the credit. And I think it's really good. It's a good thing. If you talk to transfer students who come in and tell us what the difference is between here and where they came from, it's striking. If you talk to our transfer students who leave Oregon, I can't tell you how many emails I get from people who left and still write to say how much they miss the feeling here. I think we're doing well at the Oregon Law Feels Different, even if that's not the best marketing articulation of it. Another distinction in our experience, I think we owe a lot to the folks who have led our clinics and externships. The percentage of our students who've done either a clinic or an externship in each of the last 2 years when they graduated was 85%, and most of them had done more than one. That's a really good statistic. We need to get it to 100, and I think we will. But the faculty leaders for our clinics and externships, Suzanne and Megan and Joan and Adele, along with the people who work in our clinics, Mike, Kasha, Merle, Catherine, Mindy, Beatrice, others, these are really good parts of what it is to be at Oregon Law, and I think we can do more to build on that. The third piece of the experience here at Oregon, what it is like to be a student at Oregon, has to do with the diversity of the people with whom our students study and the people from whom they learn. And on this, I think the news is mixed, if we're being candid. I think that there are ways in which the law school has for some years been a model on the campus for its diversity strategic action plan. There are aspects of the law school's programming that continue to be models for other parts of the campus. And just from a raw numbers perspective, we in the law school fret often, loudly, and appropriately about the low percentage of students of color at our school. And yet we are at this point relative to other schools and colleges with their graduate programs, we're doing okay from the University of Oregon's perspective. And I've heard lots of explanations for why this percentage or that percentage is what it is. Most frequently it is, well, you're in Eugene. Yeah, we are. And that's not a hall pass on some of this. And there are some ways in which, again, I think we're doing a very good job. I think there's a lot more to do on the diversity front. I think that the ideal framework that the university is working on right now has some parts that speak specifically to the opportunities for us at the law school, and I'm optimistic that we will continue to do good things there. On to students. Again, that had three parts, the first of which had to do with jobs. We've had progress in this front in the last few years, and we collectively owe an enormous debt to Rebecca Hanley and her team for the work that they've done, and now to Jennifer and Maria for the work that they are continuing. If you look just at the raw statistics, what you'll see is that over each of the last 3 years, our percentage of employed and our total employed has gone up each year. And this should be the first year when we see the benefit of reducing our class size, because we will be graduating, we will be seeking to place fewer students than actually got jobs last time. Now, I'm not predicting that we're going to have 130% employment rate here, but we should be able to see some real progress in that percentage, and that percentage really matters. That's the good news part of it. The bad news part of it is that percentage is still really, really low. 80% is not okay for that number. And I've heard lots of explanations, well, this region is lagging. That's true. I've heard explanations, our students want to do a kind of job that is harder to get jobs in. Okay, that may be true too. That percentage is still too low. We have to work on that. And so pieces of that are going to be the domain of those who are career services professionals. Pieces of that are going to have to fall on other parts of the administration, whether it is in admissions decisions, financial aid decisions. Pieces of that are going to fall on the faculty about whether our curriculum is aligning well with students' employment aspirations and their actual practices. There's a lot of work to be done here. Frankly, of all of the slides on this screen, this one, in my view, represents the single greatest challenge the law school has. Just to preview the rest of the slides, none of them are more critical than this, in my view. Second piece of student success, again, as I said, has to do with student debt loads. And here I think we can be proud-ish. The average debt load for our students at Oregon has decreased each of the last several years. And I don't know that that is true at other law schools. I suspect strongly it is not. We should be proud of that. It is still a really high average debt load that our students are graduating with, and there is much we need to do to manage that. But I think we can be proud that we pulled the handbrake on the ever-escalating imposition of debt on our students as a way to balance our budget. So how did we do that? How did we get to the stage where student debt loads are no longer skyrocketing? It has a few components. One component is tuition. We went through several years where we were raising tuition on average about 9%. In the last 3 years, we've raised tuition on average just over 3%. That is part of the story of how we have helped students to manage their debt loads. A second part of the story of how students have managed debt loads has to do with fee remissions and student scholarships. And there, the numbers are jaw-dropping. We have quadrupled our student scholarship budget in terms of absolute dollars, and we have gone from spending 10% of our budget on student scholarships to spending a third of our budget on student scholarships. If you want to know where the money has gone, as much heat as I have taken for taking away pizza, where the money has really gone is back into students in the form of fee remissions and scholarships. That level is not sustainable. From a financial perspective, We cannot continue that trend, and we will not continue that trend. But this is what has permitted us to bring in classes of students with improved statistics with decreased debt loads. The third piece of how we've done this is by cutting costs in the building. And everyone who lives and works here knows that we have gone through multiple years of double-digit percentage cuts to our operational budget. Most of those cuts have come in OAs and staff and in direct expenditures, although they have been spread in a lot of ways. We have kept our faculty size flat in the last 5 years, and that is frustrating to me because the very first speech I gave as dean was one in which I said we ought to grow our faculty. But to be candid, in a budget climate in which we cut between a quarter and a third of our revenues out of our books, the fact that we kept our faculty size flat feels to me like an accomplishment. We have decreased our staff and OA count by about 1 in 6. And a lot of these decisions were really hard, and I take full responsibility for those decisions, and I am grateful for the help that faculty and staff have provided in making the most with what we have. But this is how we got to the point of being able to decrease students' debt loads. The third prong on the theme of going beyond JDs are our non-JD programs. So, for example, CRES. The CRES program just celebrated its 11th anniversary, 10th anniversary. We're inching towards 11. We've had 250-something CRES students in the law school since its inception. And they're off doing incredible things, and they bring a diversity of experience and background that this law school sorely needed. And I thank, in absentia, Jane and Tim for the work that they did, and today I thank Jen Reynolds in particular deserves extraordinary credit for the work that she did sustaining the CRES program in a year when there was great uncertainty. And Eric and Liz, who have stepped up, and Kata and Hillary and Anna and Merle and Tom and others who teach in the program, thank you. Thank you for helping this program be as outstanding as it is. Our LLM program has drawn students from a staggering number of countries given how young it is. I believe that we are at 35 or 36 countries represented in our LLM classes over the years, and more than a dozen states. John and Svetlana provided unbelievable leadership for it, and I think Eric and Christy are doing a great job in perpetuating it. I think that the LLM program should and will be bigger than it is. I think that we have had a bunch of years of an LLM program that is about 10 or a dozen students, and I think just looking at the market and looking at our capacity, it should probably be about twice that. And I think doing so would only enrich our school, and I don't mean financially. The LLM students are extraordinary. Our undergraduate program, I want to pause on for just a minute because I think that it probably represents the best illustration of this law school responding nimbly to a changing landscape. We didn't have an undergrad program 5 years ago. Nobody was talking about an undergrad program 5 years ago. We had a few hallway conversations about what if and could we and maybe. And we had a faculty member, Eric's not here, who spent a summer thinking about it and talking to people. And the faculty spent a couple hours one August kicking the tires really hard on this idea and decided, yeah, this is something we want to do. And then we handed it to Stuart and Michelle, and they ran for a while with it, with colleagues across campus and a lot of time in the hallways here. And then the faculty had this audacious idea that if we're going to do this, we should really do it right. We should do it the best we can. And the best model we could find was at Berkeley, and so we stole the director of Berkeley's program. And we got Michael here. And to its enormous credit, what the faculty didn't do is then say, oh, Michael's here, nothing for us to do now. Right? It was a collective decision. We are vested as a group in the success of this, and so now we have a bunch of our tenured full professors teaching in an undergrad program where the great concern across campus was, you're just going to send adjuncts over, you're just going to try to harvest money out of us. We have just a great number of our faculty off teaching, and I am at risk of not getting them all, but I see Margie and Michelle and Mims and Stuart and Susan. I know Carl's teaching in it. There are probably others. Caroline, you're teaching in it. This is a good thing. And we have some associate deans from the College of Arts and Sciences here. And I'm just going to say right here now in public, I know there are people in arts and sciences who are quite concerned about this. They have been unambiguous about that concern. And here's what makes me comfortable asserting that this is exactly what a major research university should do. We are using the law as a lens for understanding, from a liberal arts perspective, that which is at the core of a research university. It is a focusing topic for the kind of general education that our undergraduates should be receiving. And our students want it, and our faculty are engaged in it. If you put the budget model aside, that is exactly the kind of activity in which we as a university should be engaged. Now, when you bring the budget model back in, do we have those numbers right? Do we have the incentives right? I don't know. I don't know, and mercifully, we've got a provost to figure that out. But I am proud that the law school has things that it can offer that are attractive to undergrads. And I am delighted with what the undergrads are bringing to our building. And I am confident that what we won't do is deny our students stuff that they really like, deny our faculty the chance to teach undergrads, which they really enjoy, because we can't get the math right. We will get the math right. This should make the University of Oregon stronger, because frankly, when it competes for students, for it to be able to sell that this is something that our undergrads can do, that will distinguish the University of Oregon from most places. And Roger Thompson is among the greatest salespeople for this program. He believes we will attract students who would not otherwise have come, and I agree with him. So that is their degree parts. We also are doing what we can to see about the idea of selling something that isn't a degree. Rob Illig has launched a summer sports program that has drawn dozens of students from all over the country, and they are students who would not otherwise have been here. And we're not giving them a degree, we're giving them some credit. We're selling something that is what we do, educating about the law, for people who are willing to pay us to do it. That's good. Eric Priest and Christy Gibson are working on a summer program related to China. That's also good. I think there are still other things that we can do as a law school that don't change the core of what we are. They enhance us. We are better off because we as a school can talk about sports and can talk about China. Even if not all of the school is involved in it, even if it isn't degree granting, I think this is important for the future of the law school, because I don't think we're done with the market shakeup. I think the demand for JDs, well, this year the demand for JDs is no longer down. Applications to take the LSAT are up by some percentage. Applications to law schools are up by some percentage. And the best leading indicator, apparently the best leading indicator for what applications to law schools are going to look like 18 months out is the number of times the phrase LSAT is Googled. And that turns out to be up quite a bit. So at some level, the news is good, but I don't think that what we have gone through is a downturn from which we will return to ever-increasing heights. I don't think so. I could be wrong, but I don't think we're going back to 2009. If I'm wrong, I have great confidence that we will adapt easily in that direction. A surplus of applicants is a problem with which we do not have lots of experience, and yet I am confident we could manage. I think instead it is going to be a more complicated market in which there are going to be winners and losers. Some law schools are going to see dramatic increases. Some law schools are going to fail. And I think it is the ones that are most diversified that are best positioned. We need more money. We are trying to raise it in all the different ways that we can. Jake made a presentation to the law faculty last week. The news on development is good. We are raising more money than we ever have if you take out the blip of Phil Knight and his gift, the gift that Phil and Penny made for this building. We are on track to meet an audacious development goal if we have a couple things come our way. We are raising more money on average than we have raised in the past. We have a lot more people putting us in their estates than has ever been true. We're doing what we need to do on development, and there's a lot more yet to be done. Consistent with the idea that we need to be more than just JDs, I'll pause just for 1 second to say, of the 10 biggest gifts this law school has ever gotten, at least half have come from people who were not lawyers. I believe it's actually well above half have come from people who were not lawyers. There is value in the law. People understand the potential impact of the law, and to the extent we are able to match their personal passions with our own abilities, I think there's great opportunity. So the pure philanthropic piece of development is one part of what we need to do in terms of raising money from things other than students. The other piece of it is we have more success recently in raising money from places like the legislature and foundations than we have had historically. Merle's work in the DV clinic and that funding is exceptional. And I know for our colleagues who are not from the law, this may not seem extraordinary, but Eric and Liz and Jen and Dick and Carrie and Adele and Michelle and probably some others have all raised money from outside sources for their research. Funded research is not the norm in the law. Even at the fanciest schools, it is not how legal research is done, but we recognize the resources we don't have, and a lot of our faculty are out doing what they can to generate their own, and I think that's great. I think there is a lot more that we can do, and I think in the coming years, one of the things you're going to see back on this philanthropy piece is that the faculty are going to be called on increasingly to participate in the development effort. There are alums out there who want to connect with you, and we will need your help in closing the deal because at the end of the day, people give small loyalty gifts to schools. They give big transformational gifts to people they know and trust. And so we will need your help in getting them excited about who you are and the work you are doing. And so I thank you in advance for that. The last thing up here is conclusion, and I don't have any bullet points under conclusion, and I tried. I had a couple of photos, and they didn't work. Here's my conclusion. It's been quite a 5 years. I think that we have hit the questions pretty squarely head on. And we made the best choices that we could. And the headline for me is that I've been here 15 years, and I have never been more optimistic about the future of our school than I am today, regardless of who the dean is. I think we're in position to do really good things. As for me and for my role leading the institution, this has produced some of the hardest moments of my professional life. It's produced some of the best. I have not had, personally speaking, a learning curve like this since I was a 1L, and I'm not sure even then. I have done my best to share information broadly and to make decisions in a transparent way that are aligned with our school's goals. It's been an honor to serve as dean here. I'd welcome the chance to continue serving, and again, I thank you all for being here today.
said at the end about, and I appreciate that you didn't want to make it all about you, but now I would like to make it more about you. You talked about the learning curve, and I'd be interested in hearing what you've learned about leadership over the past 5 years and how you think your leadership style has changed over the past 5 years.
The first thing that comes to mind is I used to pay my bills by getting groups to consensus. That was my profession. Before it was law professor, I mediated. And I came into the job with a view of deaning that was very aligned with that. And I think there are some pieces of that that may have served me and the school well. But I have needed to learn a lot about the difference in role, about the importance for institutions to move forward even in the absence of unanimity, and about the stance that that a dean sometimes needs to take, even when it isn't the consensus view. And that has not been easy. And I'm not sure even yet I always choose the right moments when to be out of sync with the faculty or with the students or with the staff. But it is in that arena that is the first example I can think of where I am aware of a learning curve going on. There was a hand on the TV, I think, or you were just getting up.
I have a related question, which is, I also appreciate you want to take this as an opportunity to talk about the trajectory of the law school, but I sort of have a similar question, given that this is also an evaluation of your deanship. As we look forward to, for instance, another 5 years, what are things you think you've done well, and what are things you think you do differently from years 6 through 10 than you've done years 0 through 5?
So I think it has been, I believe, very helpful for our school to have plainly articulated strategic priorities, and it took us a couple of years to get there. If I had that part to do again, I would try to get us to that shared understanding faster, because in the moments where we have to make, for example, tough budget allocation decisions, they're a lot easier now because I just put up those 3 priorities and they either match or don't. And I don't actually remember exactly why we didn't do that earlier. We went through the SWOT analysis right at the very beginning, and we were going through the self-study for the accreditation, but we never really crystallized it. I feel like we didn't really run through the finish line. And I take responsibility for that because that's not the kind of thing that would happen out of a collective. That should have been something I did earlier, and I didn't. And so I wish I had done that differently. I think well, I feel mixed about, as you may remember, I spent a lot of time in our first year or year and a half pushing some structural reforms that I thought were important. The most energy-inducing of which was the idea that we ought to be on the term system rather than the semesters. And I remember exactly why I thought that was a good idea. And I won't pretend that I don't still think that's a good idea. But I think I actually probably did that just about exactly wrong. Because I neither said, no, we really, really, really got to do this, nor took the hint early on that this was going to be an enormous drain of energy and attention. And so I think we spun our collective wheels for a while on something that did not have payoff. And I think that may be an example of a time where I was trying really hard to find consensus and not recognizing that sometimes you need to say, I would do that part over again if I could do that again. Those are two examples. Michelle?
So I asked you this when you first, this is a small question. I asked you this 5 years ago. I'm asking you this again. I think that you've done, you walked into this with the worst possible timing, got into being a leader of the school when the economy was tanking, and when the budget was tanking. And so I wonder, and you've done incredible work getting our priorities straight, getting us ready for the future, and you say you're optimistic, but part of me says, wow, why would you want to keep doing it? That you could ever do.
That's a small question.
It is a small question. Good, short. So I asked you, well, 5 years ago you didn't know that we were not going to have students and all of that, and we were going to have to do lots of things that made us quite unhappy. But why do you want to keep doing it?
For 20-something years I have known you, Michelle, and
We were 1Ls together.
we were 1Ls together.
He was on that learning curve right when I was on that learning curve.
And ever since, you do that to me. Thank you. I appreciate that very, very much.
It's a small question.
It's a small question. I don't remember what I said in response to your question at the time. At the time I applied for the deanship, the reason I wanted to do it was that I had a history of building things that worked. I really like building things, and I really thought, oh, this is gonna be fun. We're gonna build stuff together. And I thought, and you're right, I didn't see what was coming, and we haven't done so much building. But honestly, I think if you look at the last 5 years, we have actually built some things. And that's extraordinary to build in a time of contraction. And I may be wrong, but I think there are even more opportunities to build going forward. And I don't say that because I think happy days are here again, and we're going back to 2008, and we're going to have 180 full-pay students. It's just not going to happen. But I think we've got the fundamentals in place to get some really good things done. And that excites me. And yeah, I mean, you called it the worst job. No, it's not the worst job. There are days this job is really, really hard. There are days when this job is unambiguously, as Margie periodically comes by. Those of you who don't, Margie sometimes pops her head in my office, literally does nothing but opens the door and says, being dean is a form of service, you know. And there are days it is robustly unambiguous to me that what I am doing is service. But there are a lot of days that it is a joy. When Jake and I go out and find money to support something that matters, that's a really, really, really good day. And when we do the DSAC meetings, I can talk about students now because they're basically all gone. It's like the highlight of my month. They're awesome. We've got student leaders here right now who are just fantastic. And they care about the place, and they want to get things done, and they want to work with us. And working with the faculty, there are a lot of really good days. And I think that there are a lot more really good days coming. And so, I don't know, that or inertia, I don't know. It's a very conscious decision. It's not inertia. I think this is Well, like I said at the very beginning, it's the best opportunity I have ever been offered, and if the context is one in which I and we can be successful doing that more, I want to do that more.
So I guess I've been labeled over the last 5 years as the in-house pessimist, but this was really wonderful, Michael. Thank you. It allowed, I think, us as a community to also reflect collectively. That's been very helpful. The one thing I'd like to hear more about, and it was sort of buried in the discussion of distinctive reputation, is how to make it easier to do the really creative research that this school does historically. So not just this school, but the state of Oregon is known for legal innovation and very creative thinking. And I think what's needed for that sort of research, of course, money, of course, but more importantly is time. And that has become a more scarce resource in the building. CRES and more LLM students and undergraduate students, and of course the line between teaching and research does feed into each other. And this is all, teaching undergrads will inevitably make our research better. But we need time for that. How do you start thinking through building more time for faculty members to take that next step into research?
Michael, it's a great question, and I think there are even a couple more things challenging the time than even the ones that you've mentioned. I mean, the very conspicuous one is we've cut 1 in 6 administrators and staff members in this building. We have not cut 1 in 6 things we do in this building, which means that the burden has fallen some on the remaining OAs and staff and some on the faculty. I think a fair assessment would be that the faculty today are spending a greater percentage of their time on things that are administrative-ish to the extent that one can determine a precise line than they used to. And I think that's for real. That burden is not shared equally among the faculty. And I think long-term that will also be a challenge for this school because it's not like that work is going away, and yet we need to make sure that faculty have time. I have some hopes, so here are a couple of hopes before I put my caveats on them. I think we're really close to catching up with our brethren and sisterin in most disciplines in having something structured about what it might look like to seek external funding such that you can essentially buy yourself out of teaching. I don't think that we can do it without a lot of care because we're not like other disciplines. But I listed off half a dozen people who found research support in terms of finances. I think we're close to having figured out how to then translate that into teaching relief. I think that's a piece of it. I think a second piece that gives me some hope is I think we might be able to do more integrating of research with some of the other things that we need to do anyway. So for example, a lot of our centers and programs have research that needs to happen for them to be viable, thriving, important programs and centers. It's not clear to me that we've taken advantage of those in the same way with the nexus to research. Food studies is an easy example. You can't do food studies right if you're not doing any research, but we haven't figured out a way yet to tie those activities or funding streams to make sure that research is a component of it. And so those would be things that I would think might help. I'd like to say, we'll add a bunch of faculty and then we can all, I doubt it. I continue to aspire to grow the faculty, but I think we're talking about a few, not 10. And so I think that the realistic time relief associated with those hires, we could easily overstate how much that'll bring a lot of intellectual, interesting, et cetera, but will it really decrease the amount of time? I don't know. The third thing that I just don't know the answer to, I will observe that this faculty is more robustly engaged in the administration of this law school and of the various forms of faculty governance than any law faculty I've heard about in my gossiping with other deans. And that has some beautiful and some time-consuming aspects. We spend a lot more time in faculty meetings and in committee meetings than a lot of other law schools. It has been that way since I got here. I don't know it to be a conscious choice on our part, but it is part of how faculty spend a lot of their time. I'm not sure that's going to change. I think that's part of who Oregon is, but if we're being candid, I think that's also one of the costs, is that it is engagement in something that is not scholarship. And I'm not sure that's going to change, though.
I want to ask you a difficult question. We're all human. We all make mistakes. You, as much as any of us, have lost your temper at times, insulted people at times. We all have. What is it that you would see that you would do different in the next 5 years with whatever shortcomings you yourself see, not ones that I might mention, interpersonally in terms of making this a place where people feel even better than they do now?
I'm not positive I caught the question part. What would I... Help me with the question.
How would you see improvements in any shortcomings that you yourself see at the interpersonal level in the next years? How do you see yours? Because a lot of what you've talked about has been very, very good and very inspiring programmatically, but the job is a personal job. And so can you see places where you think you'll be overcoming things that you regret or that you have seen that weren't all that great in terms of personal relations?
I'm not positive this is responsive, but let me tell you the first thing that makes me think about. I would not have counted that aspect of my makeup but 5 years ago. I would not have said, oh, this is something I'm going to... But I do know, and Debbie can tell you, for one reason or another, and I don't fully understand it, for one reason or another, I spend a lot less time with my colleagues than I used to. And I know part of that is I'm on the road, and but I actually spend a lot less time with people in the building. And I think that has a couple of effects that I regret. One is, I actually like people. But the other is, it means that interactions that would have been one of 50 are experienced as the only time he's talked to me this month. And that's been really hard for me to know what to do with. Because you're right, then, if that's true, and it may be, I think for a lot of people that is true, that is the only time I talked to them this month. Well, if I was hangry at that moment, I've got a month before anything else comes out. So at the beginning of this fall, one of the things I asked Debbie to do is, if you look at my calendar, which, by the way, in all fairness to me, is brutal. Debbie now books every week some hours into my calendar that are just labeled second and third floor. And my notion is, okay, if I just go and spend some more time up there, then maybe it increases the frequency, maybe it normalizes some things, maybe I get a better understanding of what's going on. I would say that experiment has been... Well, here's my experience of walking the halls on the second and third floor. I keep saying hi to the same handful of people. And some of you probably think I'm stalking you. It's not. It's just like you're the only ones with your door open. So I'm not sure that fully addresses it, but I do think that there is something there, that I am not as present and engaged with some parts of the community here as I would have wanted to be. And I think that probably has an effect on our interactions. And by the way, I would say probably with the arrows flowing both ways. I think it's probably awkward to have the dean show up in your office unannounced, unexpected, and then you think, oh, this might be the only time to say something. And then out comes whatever comes. I'd like that to be different. And realistically, I or whoever the next dean will be, whenever the next dean will be, we need them on the road a lot. We need them out and about a lot. And so it just no longer is an internal job. And so I don't think, oh, I'll just not do that anymore. That would be not right. But it sure is a conscious part of how I am trying to be this year, at least. And I would imagine projecting that forward. I don't know when this is done. When are we done? 5 more minutes. Any other questions?
You've spoken to a lot of hope and a lot of ideas for the future, and I'd love to hear, I know most of you here know me, I am the managing director of the Conflict and Dispute Resolution Master's Program, which is tiny in comparison to some of the big stuff. And I'm wondering if you can speak to one aspect that you would grow or increase or whatever from a CRES student perspective.
So I think the biggest challenges for the CRES program are not its administration or its student body. I think the biggest challenge for the CRES program at the moment is in the faculty. I think we have great faculty teaching in the CRES program, and I think we have, well, I know as a matter of fact, we have had a succession of faculty leadership in the CRES program, and I think that is long-term a weakness. It is a master's program without dedicated faculty. And the beautiful part of that is it's got a lot of different perspectives being brought in from a lot of different disciplines. And it's got scholarship going on related to it from a lot of different angles. But the hard part is the year-over-year sustained planning, visioning, implementing that faculty leadership can bring. I think that's where the biggest challenge is going to be for the CRES program in the coming years. I'm not sure whether CRES is poised for growth in the student body. I think we probably are about the size that we can and should be if we are sticking with a cohort model. Now, I'm not positive that the cohort model will forever serve us well, and if we ever were to evolve the CRES program beyond the cohort model, then I think there would be likely opportunity for growth in the student population. I don't know whether that's wise or not. And I'm not saying I don't know as a way of saying I think it's good or bad. I actually don't know. I know that there are different high-quality programs that have made choices on each side of the line. I know why this school made the cohort choice when it did 12 years ago. Whether that still serves us well, I don't know. In the absence of dedicated faculty, I think that decision becomes even harder.
I see this as a relationship kind of issue, and so I'm thinking about, we've been asking you a lot about how you do things, but if you were to visualize success for yourself as the dean for the next 5 years, what do you need from us as a community in order for you to be successful? And how would you ask this community to change in order to work better with you as the dean?
That's a big question.
I know. Ooh, look at the time. Okay, so 2 things come to mind. One, I think as a community, we are making progress in, but have still work to do in how we treat each other, particularly in moments when we disagree with each other. There's some ways in which, being at a law school, we are very, very well trained at having people with different views in the same room together. But there are some ways in which I think we are not very good at it. because we do it in ways that create lasting, not just hurt feelings, but actual harm, in the sense that it makes it harder for us as a group to move forward and tackle the next thing that comes along. And it's possible that there are things that I do that make that harder, and that would be something I would want to. But one thing that comes to mind is, as a group, and I would include myself in this, we need to get better at that, because we're not done disagreeing with each other. So that would be one thing. The second is, and I don't know how to do this, but you didn't ask me that part. You just said, what would it look like if it were? The law school wouldn't work. It actually would not work if we didn't have a huge number of people in this room and others in this building working way harder than their jobs require them to. There are a lot of people who are working beyond probably what is reasonable. And some of that is beautiful. Some of that is of questionable sustainability. Some of that raises some internal equity issues, with a lot of people in this building feeling underappreciated for what they are doing, and probably correctly so. I think a lot of people in this building are not appreciated for the things that they are doing, and I don't know how to address that, but my concern is that if we are building the law school on the assumption that everybody will forever keep working 180%, even if people don't say thank you and don't appreciate them, and even if they don't, that doesn't seem sustainable to me. And so I don't know what it looks like, but you didn't ask me that part, and we're out of time. I think we're done. Thank you, folks.